Ukraine is struggling to stop the Russian troops due to exhaustion, lack of arms and ammunition, and not enough well-trained reserves. So the tide changes in favor of Russia. The NATO allies are dreading to work out scenarios with Donald Trump's return to the White House. And our next story explains as to why Ukraine's war is in such a bad shape. Take a look.
Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk are up in flames. Russia is unleashing multiple missiles to pummel Ukraine. Kherson is the latest to bear the brunt of the Russian offensive. Kyiv says Russian artillery strikes on Kherson damaged residential areas. Local residents recount the horror.
It happened probably half an hour ago. It just blew up so bad. I don't even know for sure. We are seeing smoke probably half an hour ago.
The attack comes a day after deadly Russian attack caused devastation in Zaporizhia. Damaged houses and burnt-out cars litter the streets. Russia has sharpened its offensive, targeting multiple parts of Ukraine's eastern front and bombing Ukrainian cities and critical infrastructure. Experts say Moscow's strategy is to exhaust Ukraine's military and force Kyiv to the negotiating table. Ukrainian President Zelensky is now hinting that he is ready to cede territory to end the war. Russian President Putin has implied that any peace deal must allow Russia to keep at least the territory that it has already occupied and guarantee Ukraine's military neutrality, meaning no entry into NATO. Now, even NATO allies are saying that NATO is a distant dream for Kyiv. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico asserts that Ukraine will lose 30% of its territory as a result of the ongoing conflict with Russia and will never receive an invitation to join NATO from the US and its allies. Polish PM Donald Tusk says that peace talks on ending the Ukraine war could begin in the winter of this year. As the war intensifies, hectic parleys in Western capital too is gaining pace. All eyes are on the change of guard in Washington, with Donald Trump warning that a ceasefire should be achieved quickly. Russia, Ukraine and their global allies are scrambling to put their side in the best possible position for any changes that Trump may bring to American policy in the nearly 3-year-old war. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, now to help make sense of what is happening at this moment in the Ukrainian war theatre and how quickly this war could, of course, come to an end, we're joined in this broadcast by Mr. Lester Munson, who is a senior fellow at the National Security Institute and is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Now, Mr. Munson, thank you very much indeed, sir, for taking time out and speaking to us here in WION. Let me, in fact, start off by asking you this. At this moment, it appears that with the change of guard at the White House, the war in Ukraine may come to an end as was expected, because Donald Trump has been saying that he would want to bring an end to the war as soon as he takes charge. But what happens to Ukraine? What sort of compromises, in your opinion, do you think Ukraine will have to make and will now have to give up its dream of becoming a part of the NATO alliance?
Well, I think this is to be determined, what the exact parameters of a deal would be. Some things that have been discussed are the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Is Ukraine willing to sacrifice some parts of its original territory from early 2014? Let's remember this war really started 10 years ago. Is it willing to go back to the original borders? Is it willing to accept a compromise? Is Russia willing to accept a compromise? What is the status of the possibility of Ukraine joining, Ukraine joining NATO? Slovakia will not decide. This will be decided elsewhere. There's already been some movement in major NATO capitals to outline a path for Ukraine to join NATO. It is unclear whether that will continue. And I think what the president-elect, Donald Trump, is trying to do is maximize his negotiating leverage and flexibility. So I think it would be foolish to rule out anything at this point. We may know more in a couple of months. The president-elect has appointed Keith Kellogg, who is a retired general and a former very senior National Security Council staffer, to be his envoy to the future talks that may exist to resolve this. So there's a lot yet to be determined, but it does, as you point out, seem very clear that the president-elect is going to make a move to bring this to an end.
And also considering the fact is to have Donald Trump views the NATO military alliance, where he's been saying repeatedly when he was president and since then that Europe must do for its own security. That means the NATO military alliance as it currently exists would already weaken irrespective of whether Ukraine becomes a part of it or not. So in your assessment, do you think the European nations would be making a mistake if they were to rely on the United States for its umbrella for security?
Well, I don't agree with your premise, I must confess. I think the things that
But that is precisely what Donald Trump has been saying. He's been saying that Europe has to do more for its own security. I hope you agree with that.
Well, I would say he has said Europe needs to do more for NATO. Europe does need to increase its defense expenditures. There is a requirement under NATO agreements that each country spend at least 2% of its economic might on defense spending. Many countries have not. Many countries are moving into that range. Many are not. And what President-elect Trump is insisting is that American allies pull their weight in the alliance. And I think that at the end of the day actually strengthens the NATO alliance. I think this question of Ukraine possibly joining NATO is a separate question from that. Of course, it's the same people who will be discussing these issues, but those are two distinct things that I think are not necessarily directly related.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Munson, for joining us into that perspective there.
My pleasure.